All right, Stephen. So, happy Saturday.
Yeah, it
Hey,
is.
so before you ask me your question about managing people, some challenge you're having there, I have to ask you because do you see this lamp right here?
Yeah,
You have the same kind of lamp right there.
yeah.
Well, what do you use it for?
Um, when I had more time, I used to do the calligraphy. And so when I was doing like fine detail brushing work and stuff, I like to use these lights. And I did remodel the room and took my calligraphy stuff out. Just I don't have the time for it. But I kept this because they're great because you just lift up these little lids and get like your little 3 times magnifier. So it's just all sorts of different things that I use it for now. Um,
So I'll tell you what I use mine for. I am not a calligrapher.
Gotcha.
I almost went calligraphist on that, but it's calligrapher. Uh, I use it to do quick quality checks on some of the products that we develop, right?
Yeah.
So you can pull out the microscope and you can get real detailed on to make sure your process is scientifically good. But if you do a lot of 500 spore traps and you want to make sure that the media is with a quick view is dispersing the way that it should,
Uh,
I
You
use
know,
that.
and you might be able to relate to this. I'm 40. I'm level 42 now, and as I continue to get older, this was the first time in the last 18 months my nearsightedness started to go. And I just went and had my prescriptions updated on my stuff. The doctor was asking me about it, and I said, it's driving me nuts. I never had nearsightedness because I'm in like these crawl spaces and you're looking at your phone and going through the pick list and grabbing the right comment. And it can be really hard if you got like 10 inches of clearance in there trying to look at stuff up that close. So,
Absolutely. Well, we're
you,
not getting any younger.
right.
I'm getting pretty close to that big 4-0 myself.
Yes. And so, like, hey, well, that's why you got to scale your business up a little bit so you don't be crawling around crawl spaces when you're 65. Um,
But we have a solution for that, by the way. But anyway, let's
that,
tell me about the
all right.
management
So
thing.
the management thing was, what do you do with employees that have been with you a long time that make a bigger mistake on the job? And I'm using myself as the example because I did an inspection like 6 months ago, and I clearly botched a roof inspection. If that's requiring a roof replacement and some sheathing as well. And I know that because I had the client go out and we put in the roof leak claim, and I've had 4 other roofers come out to give estimates and write where the mistakes were on it and stuff. And I'm reading through it and I'm looking back at my old photos to see where I made mistakes on it, and I'm not seeing it from like a home inspection standpoint. The roof wasn't leaking. It was a new roof over an old sheathing. I probably should have said something about that, but I didn't think much of it because we see so much of that. And
Well,
so,
there's nothing inherently wrong with putting a new roof covering on older decking.
correct. And so, well, they were saying that the older decking wasn't sufficient for fastening of the new roof material. And so they're thus a contributing factor as to why the new roof is leaking in multiple places.
Interesting.
Um,
Well, I'd have to see that one specifically. Obviously, as you know, we have a roof leak coverage. If you're,
yeah,
if you're doing a home inspection and there's a composition shingle, and there's old roof decking, I don't like the idea that there was something different really you could have done here, right? Because the answer to what could you have done differently, it would be to hypothesize whether the fasteners were going to hold or not.
right.
Um, I, One mystery to me in this that I would look for closely on this one, and again, happy to review it, is how how that fastener issue is contributing to, directly or indirectly to a leak. Um, if the fasteners aren't holding well, the way that would usually show itself is, a good midwesternly wind comes along and they find a few shingles in their yard, and that leads to the question. It's not
Correct.
generally, hey, my roof started leaking.
which is the case here. And what I suspected was is that everyone went out there. They've got 3 or 4 or 5 leaks on the roof randomly, and because they can't pinpoint the sources, they're going after the installation, and which was done by an unqualified contractor who didn't pull a permit.
Which you would have never known, right?
Exactly.
Not without going to some further extent. But now we lead to another way to potentially resolve the issue, right? I mean, these people bought the home recently. When you were there, it looked fine, and now it has some problems, and there's some question as to whether it was installed correctly. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of it to know that it wasn't installed correctly. But if it wasn't, and it was recent, and it was by someone who was paid to do it, then there might be some liability on them here. We'll see.
They are going after like the clients. Strangely enough, and I don't know if it's because of me and the way that I try to carry myself in the business. I've been empathetic and tried to work with them to resolve this. They're not mad at me. Like I thought they would be yelling at me at this point, being like, "We got $10,000 estimates to replace our roof. Good job."
Right.
So, which would be a reasonable reaction in my opinion. But she's not mad at me, and she's like, "Well, we want to go after the seller, because it was a flip, and we want to go after him for not pulling a permit and using an actual roofer to put the roof on the house." And some of the stuff on there we don't feel like you could have seen because it's like nailing pattern related that the roofers are saying and things like that.
And they're being reasonable for now. Maybe they are, taking a common sense approach to it. What was the inspector supposed to do? Lift up each shingle, check to see that the fasteners are installed properly and at the proper locations.
Yeah. So
that's sounds like they're being reasonable for now. The outcome of this is hopefully one of a few things. I'll put them in this order. The first and best outcome, in my view, and this is going to sound crazy to some, is for these 4 or 5 roof leaks, the cause of those 4 or 5 roof leaks to be identified and repaired and turned into claims, which is a cost to me. And that's the thing that might not seem logical to some, that I want there to be a claim for the roof leak.
We have the claim in, and Lane's working with us since they're recommending a full replacement. He's given me guidance on how to have them break it down so that they can get their coverage.
Right.
At this point, because it's an accusation or the roofers are saying that it's an error on my part, I've notified the insurance company for to put in the pre-claim and said, go past the pre-claim because the insurance is involved now, and turn it into a claim. So that they do the investigation to determine my liability in this particular case and work something out with the seller. I said,
well, hopefully they give our people the room to do what I'm really getting at, which is where our staff is going on this, which is what's the diagnosis, what's the repair to the issue. Because if we can nail that down, and then the buyers take with a grain of salt the estimates from the roofers, because yes, when roofers come out, they generally want to do roofing.
Yeah.
And then, there's a right answer to this fastener issue. Is it 100% of the roof that is having that problem, or are we really just, trying to justify that there was an installation error where there isn't necessarily one, or where it's somewhat subjective? But anyway, we'll get through that. That's the reason why we do things the way we do, is to get people through this process to get to those answers. And is this the management issue?
Well, yeah, because it's my question was like, I did the inspection. I've done thousands of inspections, and I inspected this roof like I would any other roof. Mm-hmm. So as you know, I've been growing my business. I've got my inspector. We're about to bring another guy on. And I was kind of searching out answers from some of my friends, is that, if it wasn't me and it was one of my inspectors that was having this issue, how would I address the inspector that's involved? I'm going to write my, if, at the end of the day, like you and I've talked in the past on stuff like this, I'll write a $2,500 check for my deductible to the insurance company. They'll write the difference, and maybe there'll be some of the roof claim that'll be thrown in there. Um, so I'm going to, it's not going to be like the end of the world or something like that. The people will get taken care of. Now, what do we do with an employee that's been with you a long time, that's done, hundreds, possibly thousands of inspections, and something like this that comes up where I don't think I would, after reviewing my photos, reviewing what the roofer said, I'm looking at it going, I don't think I actually would do anything different on my future inspections. And is there anything to say to that guy other than, I think this is just a shitty situation because the flipper used an unqualified guy, and that's coming back around to bite him in the ass when the lawyers get a hold of him.
Okay, so I have two very short examples in my own business and how I address them. So the other day I get a text from a client, and they said, hey, this is a wonderful package of marketing materials I just received. However, it has someone else's logo on it. And it was a pretty simple issue, right? We were putting together these boxes, just sending them out, kind of a thank you and some promotional stuff for top members in this case. And we've been going through and putting together these boxes. It's painstaking, right? Because we have to customize all these pieces and then print them and then put them in the right order and then box them up and label them. And very simply in this case, one box went to the wrong person and another box also went to another wrong person. Luckily, one of them wasn't even in this country. They're in Mexico. So we then had to ship them, back to each other. The cost involved in that mistake of putting that label on the wrong thing. I mean, you're looking at a box. It says the name of who it goes to. The stuff in the box says that name. I mean, it just seems like such a silly error, right? But they put that wrong label on there. It happens. People make mistakes. Yeah. So what do? We do the exact same thing, just a more complicated process, of course, on the roof leak repair issue. But we look at it and say, how did this happen? How do we keep it from happening again? And then we accept that it's going to happen every so many times.
That's kind of the approach that I was looking at in my mind before, when I had reached out to you. I was like, and remember, that's actually in the text message I said, man, this is having to have happened to some of the guys out there that have 15 plus inspectors. It's a numbers game. Because when I looked at, if it was something like, let's say it was something obvious that should have gotten caught, I could understand reprimanding him about it. This is just, I'm looking at this going man, I'm looking at all these photos and everything that I did. I can't see where this mistake was. So this is going to come up again.
Right. Well, and there is no mistake. Let's be clear. You inspected this the way that you should have. And this is actually a more important conversation than I anticipated. And gotcha. I'm going to give you the other example. So the wrong label on a box, if that happened a bunch of times, and after time and time again, this obvious mistake, it was clear how they could have done it right, and it was clear how they got it wrong. If that happened on more than 1% of these boxes, then I'd be losing my mind on someone, right? Yeah. And also trying to figure out what do I do at that point? Do I take that person out of that position, put another person in? Are they confused? Do they have some people might have a mental issue that leads them to doing these things? And I don't say that jokingly. I say that very seriously. They might make up numbers or what have you. So we keep an eye out for that. But that one was simple. I'll give you a more extreme version. So I had an individual claims rep that was dragging along a process on an individual claim and being what I would call overly thorough on something. And I had to pull this one aside and say, why are you doing that? What's guiding you on this. And basically what had happened is they had handled another claim previously, and they'd handled several. I mean, they've been here a while. And on one or two occasions, they missed asking for a particular document or something. And so when something went sideways, it didn't look good, right? And so their response to me was, well, I have to do this so that it meets this standard, where if it's ever quite like, I'll never have that problem again. And that's kind of good in a sense, right? Because that means the employee cares as much as you or I do about stuff.
I know I see our industry.
But then they're overcorrecting, and they're trying to prevent the 1% by making the other 99% more difficult.
We do that here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Go on.
I was going to say we do that as well. Like I get complaint calls, and then I look at it and go, all right, out of the last 1,000 of inspections I just did, what percentage of those 1,000 inspections did I get this complaint call for? If it's less than like 1% of those inspections, I'm like, yeah, this is that anomaly. That's that weirdo out there. This is that kook that you're dealing with. And so I don't make an adjustment based on that. I see that in our industry, and I'll give a perfect example. Like I saw somebody had missed like a loose toilet, and he always used to write like just fix loose toilet. And then all of a sudden, like now there's like a 1.5-page diatribe on why loose toilets will be the end of your home. And I was
yeah. Well, and then we get into that whole debate, which is crazy. This is it's amazing how many times this comes up in social media, not just in like the home inspection space, but also in the plumbing world, of whether it's advisable to caulk around the base of a toilet or not. And
I don't say anything about it. I know exactly.
There's an argument both ways, but what are we really preventing there? It's something coming up every once in a while, but there's no reason to have that level of scrutiny where it prevents you from having the bandwidth to serve as many customers and to serve them well.
I think what it is the solo inspectors overcorrecting because they don't have enough volume, because they don't experience enough. They overcorrect and then try to over-report on something so that they never have to get a phone call on Thursday night at 8 p.m.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Instead, and that's why I look at it. I'm like, well, if I had 2 inspectors, let me times the number of calls that I get by that, but what my projected is, and see how much of an issue this really is. So I kind of look at it from that perspective. And that's where I brought it back around to like this roof issue. And I'm kind of glad it happened to me, because it's giving me perspective as I'm scaling my business. Like, man, if that was my inspector, I went out there, I look at the roof, I'm going to go back to the house, look at it again. I found structural stuff on this house. So there were some other factors here involved that we don't have time to go over, but and I look at that roof and I don't see that I would do anything different today than what I did. Man, that's that anomaly one I'm going to run into once every 5 years. And then when I have like 10 guys, I'm going to run into it like once every 2 years.
Yep.
I think that's just the way
sounds about right. So the big takeaway here is you don't operate on an individual transactional basis for the worst case scenario. And because what would you do different? I mean, and here's what some would do if they weren't thinking about this in terms of what you did, which was, okay, would I adjust anything myself? Somebody out there is going to have a similar experience, and they're going to start adding a canned note into their report. And I see it quite frequently. It says, we don't lift up shingles, and you should, inspector recommends having a qualified roofer fully analyze the roof. And, and that's not really it's designed as a defense, but it turns into something that isn't helpful and isn't productive, and probably hurts their business in such a way that they can't protect as many clients as they should with their otherwise good practices.
Well, I think putting in that limits of inspection defeats the purpose of the inspection in the first place when you start trying to write a CYA comment for every system of the house that you're going through.
Yeah,
And so if you get up there and you do that on every single home, you're like, because one of the things in there was like a nail head was exposed. Every home I go on, there's exposed nail heads. I've looked at over 3,000 homes. Now, you're going to tell me that 1 out of 3,000 that had an exposed nail head contributed to the entire roof system failing? Get the hell out of here. Let me go get
exactly.
Mike Casey for this one.
Let's take your hypothetical in a slightly different direction. Okay, let's say that you have an inspector working for you. They've worked for you for a couple of years, and then you start to get a few complaints here and there, right? So at that point, you're going to want to do the same kind of analysis, and you have a really great feature in your business that helps with this. I'll tell a very personal story because that's where some of this stuff comes from. Growing up in a multi-inspector firm, but you're familiar with one here in Indianapolis that that I'm related to, and that I grew up in. At one point in time, I remember this very clearly when I was roughly 15 years old. There was an inspector that had been working at my parents' company for a couple of years. And what he did was, at the time, there was no inspection warranty. There was no 1-800 number for people to call and say, or, raise their hand and say, I have a problem. And then it hits the system. And if it goes outside of certain parameters, it comes back to you as a notification. So none of that existed. It was just, good old fashioned, we run a good business. If a client calls, we're going to take care of them. And that system worked great for, 12 years. And then this guy came along. And what he did was he would tell clients, if you ever have a problem, give me a call. Maybe initially with some good intent, right? Like he wants to deliver good service. He wants to get referrals directly to him and that sort of thing. But then he started getting complaints and he didn't want to take them back to his boss. For a year, those complaints piled up. And the office, the business owners, they didn't know anything about it. They didn't know that this guy was talking to this client and saying, oh, I'm a little busy now, but in a couple of weeks here, I'll come out on the weekend and fix that deck issue for you that I missed, and or whatever it was. And it could have been something that was his fault. It could have not been. It could have been something within the scope of an inspection. It could have not been. But he wasn't handling it correctly out of some level of fear. So if you could go back in time, the best solution would be, hey, here's a piece of paper with an 800 number. You call whenever you have a problem, and that solves for that issue. We don't have inspectors hoarding complaints with our clients for that reason. But also, just a good practice would be for inspectors to know that they can and at times make mistakes. It's something that we always try to improve on. And if you make a mistake or if you get a complaint, you got to bring it to me, and you can't be afraid to bring it to me. Right? So it'd be a little bit of prevention.
I did the way I tell my guys is that make me more money than you cost me. And what I mean by that is like, you don't be afraid. I'm not going to club you over the head like a baby seal if you make a mistake. All right. But at the end of the day, if I've got to write a few checks, take care of things, I get it. We're going to learn from it, move forward. Don't continue to do it, and you'll be okay. I don't want people, and I think when you take a club to them and like if they have to be straight as an arrow, that can set up a scenario where you don't hear about things till things pile up.
Right.
So even with my new guy, and I expected it's like our first year, I expect him to miss a few things and some other things, and some little things have come up, but it's way more profitable just to take care of it, do a little bit of training with them, and let them continue, because that's how we grow as people. And even as business owners, we all talk about fail forward. You have to make mistakes in order to sometimes move forward. So
Sure.
it's not the end of the world. We can learn from this and do something differently. But that's when I ran into this and started reaching out to people about, well, what do you do if like I'm looking at this going, I don't see how I would do anything differently. This is just a shitty situation. Sorry. This is a bad situation.
It's
How
okay.
do what do I do in the future to prevent this? I may not be able to. I have
Well, it's worth mentioning that prevention comes in a few forms. One, a process for customer complaints, which is, obviously a part of what the warranties do, but also a part
yeah,
of what you do when you go to clients and say, hey, if you have a problem, give me a call, it gets you taken care of. The second thing is making sure your guys are not afraid to make a mistake,
yeah,
and not afraid of their own shadow, and not inspecting based on their worst experience in history, right? And also in training, obviously, it goes without saying, training should be somewhat extensive in this industry. It needs to be.
yeah.
I've never found a solution for an express level of training in
I
home
don't think you
inspection.
can
It
have
doesn't
one.
work. But
Yeah,
I'll give you another thing that is a major prevention thing for these problems, because people do make mistakes. They're going to see new things. There's no way you can train everything. There's no way you can simulate that experience of seeing everything. So when your guys are new, you give them the newer homes. You give them the slab homes. You give them the smaller homes. You keep their schedule light as they get uh, acclimated to processing reports and doing everything they have to do. But you also limit your risk by not putting them in situations that have an enormous amount of complexity, because they're going to get lost in that. So that, and that way, when they make these mistakes along the way, they're fairly limited in their scope.
it. I guess the difference when it comes to training and being the business owner, when I started, because I was new in the area, I couldn't get like the easy 10-year-old home on a slab. So I've done this a little bit with my employees, because all I would get was like the blighted property that should be knocked down. And I'm walking around like, I got to document and detail out this house. And I would spend like 8 to 12 hours writing a damn report, because I was a knucklehead new guy detailing everything out in this 100-year-old investment property that should really be knocked down, that
Right.
people are still living in for some reason without air conditioning, right? And so I've taken my guy out with me to a couple of those and been like, here's everything, inspect this property, take your time with it, and come back to the report with me. Like, I swear, I like throwing them on blighted properties once in a while, because the blighted property is just as good as going to the House of Horror for Internachi in Colorado. It's just, you should knock it down. Everything's wrong with it, right down to the siding that's on the house.
Well, it's a good training opportunity, if nothing else, and
Yeah,
and by the way, it's not like there's nothing on that much older, um, blighted or decrepit, whatever we want to use.
yeah.
It's not like there aren't things that an inspector can help, even if he's newer, to expedite you on, and still be there and get some of that experience. So, and that's good. It's obvious you're going to have them with you or with a senior inspector on those kind of properties. And, your mid 90s and beyond slab track homes,
Well, they get
maybe.
it now. They get the new ones, and they're like, "Oh, this is such an easy day." Because now that I've thrown them at some of these older ones, are like,
Yes.
we know where in town. Like, I see this street's coming up this week. I know what I'm walking into. So I'm like, "Yep," and a pack of lunch for that one.
And we do the same thing in our business too. I mean, you mentioned one particular staff member who's really guiding a process from our special escalations team for that. And why? Because it's complex. You got 5 different roof leaks. You got 5 different roofers. Everybody's given $10,000 bids, and they're saying that there was an installation error. And you have a buyer talking about legal action against one of the parties, not you. Well, somebody who got trained on answering the phones and working our databases and handling minor plumbing claims 2 weeks ago is not going to be on those calls.
Yeah,
It's not going to touch that record. So those ones, we find them, we guide them to the more experienced team, and that's the exact same thing that you need to do in your business. So you've kind of answered your own question there. Did I tell you anything you didn't know?
No, I think I just needed to talk it out with somebody. Like I wouldn't, if it was one of my experienced inspectors and this was the scenario, after going out there and looking at it myself, I would say, don't worry about it. This is why we got E&O insurance and we're covered. And, just bad things are going to happen. Let's try to learn from the experience as they work through it, see if we can see what we can gain from it, and then keep moving forward.
Well, if I didn't tell you anything you didn't already know yet, I'll give you one thing. And it's all of the points we've discussed, you already knew you needed to talk through them, but it's, hey, mistakes are made. Do everything you can to prevent or limit the potential ramifications of a problem early on, especially in their career. When something does happen, you look at the process and say, could it have been better? Should it even be improved, or would that actually hurt the business side and make the process of what you do not functional for the real estate transaction, not conducive to what we do every day. But even if you go through all of those steps and you have somebody who's trying really hard, good guy, etc., if they're drawing the wrong card off of the deck way too often,
It'll show itself though. I would have to be like, I'd have to have like 5 complaints in the last year on me. I'd be like, what am I self up to? It's like with that guy. All right, we got this guy. He's been with us for 5 years. All of a sudden, the last year, we've got 10 large complaints on him, all of something like.
Yeah. At that point, you just have to say, either this guy is unlucky or something is up that I don't see.
Yeah.
And so, there's a level of frequency where you just go, hey, this isn't working out. Either you're unlucky or I'm missing something, but either way, this isn't going to go well for both of us. So I need to give you the opportunity to go find your next opportunity.
And not to say that I'm perfect and everything. And this is why, like, I'm glad it happened with me at this point in my business growth. Like, I have caught a number of bad installs on roofs that I've called out. And the contractors, because she asked me, actually, all the roofers that were called out to evaluate the property are other roofers I've referred business to in the past. So I had actually looked forward to reading their reports. So I know them. So I wanted her to front load the number of roofers she got out there to validate, like, hey, they're consistent what they're saying here.
It's interesting you bring that up. Are you coming to Inspection Super Conference, by the way?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay. So Saturday is our big main stage day. It's kind of our product launch day. And one of the big things we're focused on this year is bringing the inspector into a capability of managing those contractor interactions with homeowners. So there might be somebody out there that isn't being cooperative with you, that isn't, an understanding individual, that maybe got a recommendation from you for one of these roofers, and they've gone out there and they've said virtually the same thing, and they've submitted that to the client, and you don't know about it. So wouldn't it be great if every time one of your, or many times, one of those roofers that you like in town writes an estimate for somebody that you've done an inspection for, that you get a copy of it?
That would be helpful.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that you look at all of them. I'm just saying it would be nice if they were there. And, then it kind of helps you put together the pieces. You have this person calling with, this complaint or requesting a report from 2 years ago or something like that. And you can go into a system and go, have they called on one of our contractors? Wow, there they did. And here's what he said. I'm going to get ahead of this.
I don't know. It's because I'm prior military. I've built a solid network of contractors around me that I refer stuff to. And it's not just because of the home inspection business. Like, we're closing on our 4th rental property here within the next 30 days. And so, like, there's work going to these guys as well. So, and I've been working with these guys for years, some of them, so they don't go out and just underbus us,
Yeah.
And then those kind of things like you see in other parts of the country, or, we do have some guys in the areas that are difficult to work with, you could say. Some other inspect where they're adversarial with the contractors. So some of the contractors actually call me on how to like, Steve, that's great to work with you. You try to actually resolve issues. Like, what do I do with this other guy that's being difficult and trying to cite code or something like that? And I'm like, well, call him up and try this and see if that works, or just fix it and ask him, and, you know, send him a photo and be like, would you accept this? Those kind of things that I'm trying to help them through. So it's not just one or two contractors, it's a bunch that, you know, they're like, I love you, but like, what the hell's with the rest of your peers? And I'm like, I can't speak for them. We try to be amicable. We're all looking for resolution, so we're not working till 8 p.m. on Saturday night. So talk to me.
Well, I won't reveal too much about it, but part of the part of the feature that I'm talking about involves some promotion of contractors and the ones you like.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a value to that for them, obviously. I think there's a value for us too. There's a value to knowing that your clients are calling the kinds of contractors that won't throw you under a bus.
Well, and do good
or
work.
won't try to, or will be reasonable and walk something back if they were being a little over the top.
Yeah.
You know?
Most of them that I work with, they're trying to do their jobs, they're trying to do them right, and they're just like me. Like, they want to just grow their business and be able to, like, not have to work till 8 p.m. at night fielding stupid phone calls. So, you know, we're by building that network of having people that are good, that are solid to work with, it just makes things smoother.
Well, I'm gonna I'm gonna pick on you on one thing real quick, and then I got to close this out and get back to preparations for this. You know, I mean, we've moved Vegas to Indianapolis. It's a lot of work.
That is.
Yeah. But you just mentioned something that I think is also very important. I've been getting a lot of calls about this lately because of some of my posts in our groups about wealth creation, retirement accounts, stocks, bonds, etc. And you just mentioned that you are closing on your 4th rental property.
Yeah.
That's huge. Congratulations.
I did it all this year.
All of them were this year?
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I put the money aside and I went out, found the properties, because I kind of joke about it because I build networks, and I'm always asking for books to read. So I read a lot of the books, did a lot of the groundwork, just like the home inspection business, to get us where we are. I delayed purchasing them in the past to build myself doing the inspections. Now that I have the inspectors partially in place, or I have inspectors in place, it gave me the time to now focus on putting the other properties, because the properties are going to provide that passive income to actually provide some benefits for our inspectors. And I'm teaching them that as well, because we don't have non-compete, we have education contracts. I said, if I'm a crappy employer, you need to go work somewhere else. I'm going to build a great place for you all to work. And when you have enough properties of your own, you may not have to work as much, and we can hire another person to teach them.
Wait, so you're teaching your guys to go out and buy rental properties?
Yeah, I want them to.
Good. That's interesting. That is a very interesting approach. I don't think I don't think people spend enough time making sure that their employees are building that nest egg, right?
Well, think about it like this. My lead guy, right, he's really good. He came from new construction, and he wanted to be a home inspector. And he sees what I'm doing with the rental properties, and we talk about it over lunch when we have little meetings and stuff. So it's not like we're carving days out for this stuff. I said, here's the educational resources. Start reading like I did, get educated, and we'll continue our conversation. I said, if you learn and you have, let's say you got 10 properties that were cash flowing $400 a month, you got $4,000 a month, and I'm doing the same thing. Why don't we put our heads together and start some new construction, and we don't have to take any draws on anything yet, while we build spec homes and make even more money, and we hire more inspectors to run the home inspection business, and you just roll with me because you don't want to run your own business because you see the crap that I'm going through as a business owner. He said, that sounds great. When can we start?
The way you said that, it's almost sounded like an impersonation of another inspector that I spoke to this morning.
No, I'm just saying, like, when I talk to them and I interview them, not everybody, this is my whole thing. I grabbed them, I shook them. And I said to him, if you're inspecting homes when you're 65, I'm 10 years older than you. I'm going to beat you with my cane.
Right. Well, so I'm glad you've gotten educated on it. I'm glad you're involving the team in really almost a team building exercise on steroids, which is, hey, let's all learn how to, be in the rental property game, which is a fairly low risk game. When you're talking about, and I'm just going to take from the $400 in passive income on a property that, we're looking at properties in that $100,000 to $150,000 level, or nothing insane. You're not going out and buying $500,000 properties. No. So it's not like those houses have a lot of potential for huge losses.
Right.
Yeah.
They're well, I'll show you. Probably time for a different conversation. We're not being recorded. I'll open that playbook up and just show you, because it's not rocket science.
Well, let me tell you about my playbook. We don't have to go there too big time.
I got you.
But I actually bring to my real estate investment portfolio, I have, for better or worse, I've never looked at it as a cash flow resource. Every single property I've ever bought, I put on a 0 cash flow level, and then just let it roll for a long time. And 20 years later, 21 years ago was my first property I bought with that idea. So in some cases I would end up with 15-year mortgages, and that would bring the payment to where, between what I was bringing in on the property and all of the other expenses, that I'd be zeroed out. And it forced me to work my butt off, because I had no passive income coming or cash flow coming from these properties. And actually I put myself in a somewhat difficult position at one point, because as you start to pay down these properties, the amount of interest that you're paying per month is less. The amount of principal you're paying becomes more, which means you don't have as much that you can write off on your taxes at the end of the year, because it was principal payments. Correct. So now you're gaining in this, net worth, and becoming real estate rich, if you will, but you don't even notice, because your cash flow is 0, that your cash flow, net cash flow, including your tax situation, is going to be negative, X amount of dollars, and you're not going to know it until April of next year.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to write a check. And so, then it puts you in even a tighter position, and then you have to work your butt off. And it's one of many things that lit a fire under my butt, and I'm glad you're doing it.
We're looking at it as a philanthropic standpoint as well. Like when Wally does his presentation, I'm like, how can I give back to the community better? What if I took 1 month, just 1 month of the year, of positive cash flow out of the rental properties, and donated that to the Evansville Rescue Mission, or funded some other sort of pay off all the lunches for the kids at school, something, or used it to bonus everybody, or pay for, like, we're adding in AFLAC for everybody that works here. So
absolutely. Last thing I'm going to ask you, how is the market in Evansville, Indiana right now?
It's very hot. I just hired another guy, and like the whole point of hiring was to get me from working 7 days a week. I'm right back where I started. So I'm like, I got to hire another guy to get the hell out of the field as much. So I can see, and it's really hit me hard this year, how important it is to hire and train these guys so that I can actually keep strategizing, because my employees are like, you need to stop working so much, you can grow faster, because they're benefiting because we pay more. My guy's gonna, I hear people saying they're gonna pay their inspectors $40,000 a year to start. We're doing $100 in inspection times 10 a week times 47 weeks a year. That's 5 weeks off a year. Your full base pays $47,000, not including your ancillary kickers. So I
I love the way you analyze things and the thought process there, and I think you should share that more often with other inspectors, with other people in our industry, because I think that they would benefit from it. And yeah, we're both in that 40-year-old age category, which makes us still somehow kind of the young guys in the industry. I mean, not the youngest anymore, but kind of the young guys. And that's good. But on this Evansville thing, and I know a lot of people in Evansville. I've hung out in Evansville. It always appealed to me as a place that was rich in history, a lot of great old architecture. You have the river there. You have the riverfront. I'm pretty sure that casino was a bad idea. I'm not sure that worked out real well. I think they called it like the Astar or something like that. And that should be gone by now. Maybe it's sunk. But I always felt like Evansville was the next place to be one of the great Indiana cities that would be a great growth level as soon as it was connected by interstate to the hub of Indianapolis.
We're blowing up. They can't build fast enough. We can't grow fast enough. That's part of the real estate part. I'm not taking we don't need the money from the real estate to increase standard of living. It's all going to get reinvested into more stuff. So we're actually going to grow bigger and faster because I've got the extra coming in along with the home inspection. So
I think you're riding a great wave of sentiment that everyone in Evansville should have. And I would expect the population growth there to be, in the double-digit percentages for the next 3 to 4 years.
I had a guy get mad at me. It was anecdotal. I went to go do an inspection, and one of the locals here, he was a little older, and he was a contractor. He was there to supervise me while I did the inspection. And he saw me scurrying around. He's like, "You got some hustle." He's like, "Why the hell did you come here to Evansville?" And I looked at him, and I could tell, he's driving a rickety old truck and stuff, and I'm wearing a uniform, and I got a professional-looking vehicle out there. I looked at him, and I said, because of the tremendous opportunity that other people here in Evansville haven't capitalized on. Now I got to keep rolling because I got 3 inspections a day that I can't keep up with.
Yep.
And that guy sat there with his arms crossed, pissed off the rest of the inspection.
And I keep saying last question. I promise this is the last question. I haven't driven down much of that riverfront, the downtown streets, the place where some of those older, some even Victorian style homes are. And, there had been some effort to revitalize those. How is that going?
It's growing phenomenally, and they keep continuing to develop. We're looking at stuff down the road after we finish our foundation of other properties to get into bigger projects in the area while we continue to develop the home inspection business. You're going to see us really starting to diversify into some other things coming up down the road once we get our 3rd and 4th inspector in place, because that'll free me up to other projects. But they're developing all the older homes, the historic property. They continue to redevelop those neighborhoods to help bring in business, artists, and musicians to further develop that downtown historic feel of Evansville. Not to mention all the medical growth we have here, along with our manufacturing. Our area is ripe, and that's why it's called Champion Home Inspection, not Rager Home Inspection, because there's just a tremendous opportunity for us to expand out and around these commuting areas. The Toyota plant's going crazy. Princeton's growing. Fort Branch area is growing right down 41. And we're starting to see a lot of growth over there in Henderson as well, and right into Spencer County as well. So
excellent.
You continue to grow.
Well, keep doing it. And I'll see you in Indy.
Yeah, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you. And have a great rest of your Saturday, Steve.
You too. Take it easy.
Steve.